It's an untenable position. It's an intellectually unserious and untenable position to downgrade Jesus Christ to a mere sage. Because, Plato didn't think he was God. And I think that if Plato had gone around saying he was God, we wouldn't be teaching Plato in a university today. The same thing with Socrates and Aristotle and Gandhi, certainly didn't present himself as any kind of Messiah either. So, you just can't get away from the fact that Christ is the Christ, right? Not a proto-hippie or something. We still live in a kind of post-Christian landscape. So for millennia, right, we had a society that, reflected Christian moral ideals. And then a lot of people lost their faith in Christ, or maybe we could talk about Judeo-Christian moral ideals. But then a lot of people lost their faith, but they didn't lose those moral ideals. And so it makes sense that they want to downgrade, Christ into just a philosopher or something, who sort of cottoned on to some eternal truths. So I think there's a historical, sociological impetus behind that makes sense. But again, I think it's intellectually not tenable. And I would hope that people would recognize that if they reject the faith, then they need to reject these ideals, or at least be open to rethinking them, because they're kind of a package deal. And so I think you have a lot of residual Christianity, which, actually, we're losing that, I would say. I wouldn't have said this so much 20 years ago, but now I would say that we're losing even the residual Christianity, because increasingly notions of forgiveness are going by the wayside, notions of mercy are going by the wayside, and so, I can more easily imagine now a much more thoroughly post-Christian future in which even the ideals start to drop out. And it becomes a more sort of, I think, Nietzschean will to power kind of ideology takes hold. And if you're really into Nietzsche, that would be great. I personally find that a little bit dark. But Nietzsche sort of recognized, one of the things that makes Nietzsche such an interesting and profound philosopher is that he recognizes in the 19th century that, we have this kind of sentimental residual Christianity that bears very little relationship to the original version that you find in the New Testament, but that also doesn't make sense because God is dead, and we know this. And so Nietzsche called for a reevaluation of values, right? That ultimately was what the Übermensch was meant to do, right? Was to create and live authentically according to his own values. And anything else was what he considered a slave morality. And, we may be entering that more Nietzschean phase. And, who knows what'll come of that. That will be interesting. But I think that the impulse to make Christ into a sage or just a wise person signaled perhaps passing a hesitance to enter into that brave new world of reevaluating values. I think that Jesus Christ actually naturally attracts. So I think that the best thing we can do is point to Christ. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the times we put ourselves in the way of people looking at Christ. And we want to say, look at me, or look what I'm doing, or look what I'm saying, when really we should be pointing to Christ and his saints, because I think they just do a much better job I mean, that's where we need to be looking, because the saints are saints because ultimately they're looking to Christ. And if you do that, of course, obviously there's no guarantees, because people are free. But I think that's the basic move that you need to make. And when you look back to Christ, then of course, again, you're going to come back to paying attention to what he says, right? The fullness of what he says, and how the fullness of what he says hangs together in a picture of the moral, the spiritual life, the life of grace. What is Christ inviting you to, right? What is he inviting you to? And it's not just a political way of thinking. It's not just a morality that he's inviting you to. He's inviting you into something much, much deeper than that. So you just have to point to that.